By moving from common standardized exams and assignments, classrooms that focus on those deeper learning competencies go a step further by requiring students to master concepts and apply knowledge in meaningful ways, like through research projects and presentations. The second competency, thinking critically and solving complex problems, means that students can effectively identify, gather, and interpret data to solve complex problems. They can apply tools and techniques from core subjects to formulate and problem solve. These tools include data analysis, statistical reasoning, and scientific inquiry, as well as creativity, nonlinear thinking, and persistence. Competency 3 on your screen is working collaboratively. This encourages teachers to have students working together to complete tasks and communicating and incorporating multiple points of view to meet goals. This leads directly into the fourth competency of communicating effectively, in which students clearly organize ideas and thoughts and both give and receive clear feedback. The fifth competency is learning how to learn, or self-directed learning. This competency would encourage students to be capable of directing their own learning through goal setting while reflecting on their strengths and areas of improvement, which result in a higher level of adaptation and commitment. The last competency, developing an academic mindset, just means that students develop self-confidence in their ability to learn and become persistent in goals and tasks, while seeing the relevance of learning in the classroom to the real world. Feeling a strong sense of belonging within a community of learners and valuing intellectual engagement with others is a critical component of deeper learning. Students become motivated to put in the time and effort needed to build a solid knowledge base and to accomplish important goals. The deeper learning model places the students at the center of their learning and empowers them to engage in their own learning and the world around them. We've looked at the definition now of the deeper learning and what the deeper learning competencies are. I want you to think about the classrooms that you observe in your building, the teaching practices that you see, and the way students are asked to engage during instruction. Think about the questioning strategies that are in place in those classrooms. And think, are you seeing a variety of questioning styles, such as asking students to give evidence for their responses? Or is the majority of the questions teachers are asking simply those recall questions? Let's also think for a second about your option teachers that you may be supervising. And we all know how big of a burden that is right now for leadership. It's so critical for those option teachers to understand how questioning techniques play a role in the learning of all the students. It's so critically important that your Alt-Cert teachers and Option 6 teachers realize that the teaching has to match what we want the students to be able to do. One person that both Angie and I have a lot of respect for, Harvey Silver, often says, change the question, change the thinking. This statement is so true in today's classrooms. To alter our way of thinking, sometimes we have to alter the questions that we are asking. Ask yourself, do all these things that I'm seeing in my classroom promote the 6 deeper learning competencies? And if not, what would need to change in order for deeper learning to happen in those classrooms? Feel free to let us know some of those areas that may need to be shifted in your classroom or in your building in the chat. We would love to see what you're thinking. I want to give you just a minute to read the quote on the screen. I'll try really hard to be quiet for a second. This quote came from an article in Education Week entitled, "The Deeper Learning Movement Needs Deeper Learning Leaders." It sounds very familiar. If we as leaders want to see the students exhibiting success across the deeper learning competencies in the classroom, then as leaders, we have to support and encourage the teachers that are expected to create those deeper learning opportunities for their students. We may have to build that environment for all the learners, including the teachers. Deeper learning doesn't just happen by accident. We have to establish that environment. As leaders, we have to design the opportunities for teachers to experience the same deeper learning competencies. To do that, we must create opportunities for the teachers to lead in schools. We have to envision and generate new measures of what success looks like for the teacher leaders in our buildings. Teachers must be encouraged to think critically about their instructional practices. They must be encouraged to be reflective and ask themselves those hard questions about the effectiveness of their teaching practices. To create that optimal classroom learning environment, one that is full of participation, questioning, learning, sharing, reflecting, school leaders must always model what they expect from those teachers. Angie?
Sorry about that. I couldn't get my unmute to pop up. You know, it always happens when you're getting ready to speak. So as we think through what Renee has said, we want to now focus on what is the principal's role or the leader's role if you are a district leader or a state leader. One of our major concerns is we have to remember that teachers are learners too. And we must have an environment that supports their learning if teaching practices are expected to change, and those teaching practices meet the rigor of the deeper learning movement. In order for students to experience deeper learning in all classrooms, not just a few, all schools need leaders, and I would venture to say all districts need leaders that can create optimal learning conditions for the adults, for the teachers, for the principals. I'm going to give you just a second, Renee, if you'll go back to that one.
Sorry.
I did not give them time to read that. So I don't want to read the slide to you, but if you will read the little passage at the bottom there and think about that for just a few seconds. When we think about that deeper learning for students, how can we as leaders help to create deeper learning for the teachers in our buildings? So many of you may have seen this video before. Maybe it'll be a good laugh break for you here at the end of the day, but I'm going to ask you to ponder on something as you're watching it. Why in the world would Renee and I show this video when we are talking about the optimal learning environment and deeper learning for teachers and students? I think about kids in my classroom. I always said they wore out a path to my desk because they would say, is this right? And they go back and do one more thing. Is this right? So I really want you to just think just a second. So how does this relate to teachers in the field? If you are a leader, how does this video, even though it's a huge exaggeration, hopefully it's a huge exaggeration, how does that relate to the teachers in your buildings?
They're waiting for us to solve all their problems. They want to be spoon-fed, just like we tell teachers not to do to students.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Allison, because that was what Renee and I both were thinking. We have both seen this video before and we were like, oh, that is perfect, because if we're going to provide deeper learning opportunities for kids and we tell teachers, don't spoon feed them, let them think through it, then we have to be able to develop that culture and that environment for our teachers as well. So when I was thinking through this, here are some things I thought through. Even though it is an exaggeration, this is how some teachers feel when they're faced with adversity. They feel this way, especially if they have the perception that the environment that they're teaching in does not support risk-taking or innovation. And I've taught in many different school settings. I have taught in schools where I felt very, very comfortable to try something new. I have also taught in settings where I was told, we bought this curriculum, we bought this program for you, you are going to follow this program. So I think about the times where I might have been stuck on that escalator trying to teach that program. So it's a type of learned helplessness, kind of what Allison was saying there. we teach people, let us come and rescue you. We'll help you. We'll give you the guidance to get through this next step and then this next step. As leaders, we have to start thinking about providing opportunities for teachers to develop mindsets that will allow them to grow in their profession. And I know you guys have seen, the mindsets, but these are very difficult to read, and we'll be happy to share this slide with you, but don't worry, we're going to zoom in on a few as we go. So an OLE for teachers is centered on developing habits of mind. So like I said, we're going to zoom in on just a few here. What are habits of mind? Well, they are thinking habits. That's the way I like to think of them, that push us as far past simpler answer retrieval. So they change our pattern of thinking to help us gain success when we don't know the answer to a question or a problem. And habits of mind provide the framework for developing dispositions for leaders and teachers to use when they're confronted with problems and situations that the answer is not right there in front of them. So the leaders and teachers who actually draw up on this model of mindset and disposition when they're working with their students and their peers prioritize successful behaviors. When leaders draw up on these dispositions with their colleagues, they're modeling and inviting interdependence and innovation. So as leaders, if we can think about these mindsets and develop those mindsets in our teachers, then we are promoting that innovation that we want to see, that risk-taking. Practicing these habits of mind are essential for developing the deeper learning competencies. We have selected 5 of these that we're going to highlight that we feel, Renee and I, feel are the most closely related to mindset change for teachers if we expect them to change their practice. So as you hear these, I want you to think about, do your teachers in your building or the people that or the teachers that you see, do they exhibit any of these mindsets? And how can you as a leader provide some opportunities for your teachers to develop and hone these mindsets? And do you model these mindsets yourself for your staff? I find myself not modeling some of these at times. So the first one that came up there is flexible thinking or thinking flexibly. We're living in a rapidly changing environment right now in our schools, and it's likely to continue to be the case for quite some time. So thinking flexibly is part attitude. So it's our openness, I'm having trouble talking, to new ideas. And it is also part action, knowing how and when to expand our horizons and use new ideas. As leaders, we recognize the importance of adapting to new situations and building the capacity to change our minds when we receive new or additional data. Leaders determine when to think more broadly and when to focus on details. When confronted with problems or challenges, they encourage creative and novel thinking. Effective leaders think flexibly by asking these metacognitive questions. In what other ways might I think about this? And what is another perspective I need to consider? What else might I try when I get stuck besides screaming for help or looking for my phone like they did on the escalator? How does stepping back and looking at the big picture open my eyes to new ideas? And when and why should I change my thinking and my actions? I think this goes to say we need to think flexibly, but we need to be open to new ideas. So the next one that's popping up there with the pretty pink border is taking responsible risks. So yes, we want to think flexibly. We need to know when to take another approach. And we also need to make sure that it is responsible. So risk-taking is an increasingly critical element of leadership and essential for the organization's capacity to innovate. Effective leaders inspire others to confront fears and challenges based on what they say and what they model in their own behavior. As responsible risk takers, they do not behave impulsively. Their risks are educated. They draw on past knowledge, are mindful of options, thoughtful about consequences, and have a well-trained sense of what is appropriate. So we're not just going, as my Pike County people would say, we're not going just all willy-nilly. We are looking for things that are research-based. We are thinking it through before we try new things, but we have that environment where we can try new things. When encouraging a teacher to take responsible risks, effective leaders consider these things. They consider developing a capacity to live with some uncertainty. Think about teachers you've worked with in the past or teachers you may work with now, or like me, teachers that you live with. Are they okay with some uncertainty? Challenge the process of finding an answer rather than avoiding what is not known. When I think of this, I think about productive PLCs. When teachers feel comfortable to come together and be vulnerable enough to say, I don't know what to do next, let's put this on the table and let's think it through. I also think about the PDSA cycles. How do we set a culture where it's okay to plan something, go do it, come back and decide, did it work? What changes do I need to make? If it didn't work, is it worth trying again? So also being patient as a leader. Sustain a process of problem solving, investigation, or creation over time. And this is something that I have to remind myself of very often. Change does not happen overnight. So as a leader, the things we want to see change are sometimes a change of practice, but they're sometimes a change of belief. And it takes a little longer to change a belief. Live on the edge of their competence. Take a chance on working on problems and ideas and that are challenging and outside of your expertise or the teacher's expertise. I've worked through KDE with the active implementation science for several years. And something that always stood out to me was the motto of implementation science was to get started and get better. So being able to take those risks to get started, being okay with the uncertainty, looking at the data that we collect, that helps with those mindsets. And if we want to see change in the classrooms so that teachers are using deeper instruction so that students have deeper learning opportunities, I think these things are so important. All right, Renee.
The next habit of mind that Angie and I thought was so critical to point out is thinking interdependently. When leaders think interdependently, they collaborate with a sense of purpose and a mission. They encourage others in their building to speak up, contribute to the discussion, and maybe even advocate for a particular position or a plan. They also know when it's time to take their own plan off of the table or to make accommodations for others in the group, for others or the group's ideas, goals, and plans. The power of collaborative thinking is increased exponentially by the dynamic interchanges in the group. They contribute to a common goal and draw on the resources of others. Effective leaders ask themselves questions like, how can I best contribute to this group? How am I affecting the group? Am I slowing them down? Do I need to be quiet for a minute and let some of the others share their ideas? Or how is the group affecting me? Another question might be, how can I withhold my own agenda and my own plans and work on behalf of the task of the group? The next habit of mind is persisting. As leaders, we've all been put in the position where we really just can't give up when the solution to a problem is not immediately available to us or immediately apparent. I've heard teachers say when I've been in classrooms, I just can't do this. I just can't do this. And sometimes I've heard students express the feeling that the assignment's just too hard. When we have difficulty persisting, it's often because we're dealing with a host of uncomfortable and emotional experiences. And we all face this as leaders, we all face this as teachers. And it's much the same for our students. Persisting in the workplace requires the ability to enable someone to overcome adversity and challenges in the workplace. When faced with uncertain situations, resilient leaders and employees figure out ways to push forward and complete daily goals. Although times may get frustrating and complicated, they strengthen their ability to stay focused on what's most important on behalf of the quality of the work and the needs of our students or teachers. It's also about making conscious decisions to push forward to produce successful results. Whether working with our teachers or those difficult teachers, the option 6 teachers, it's important to stick with it until the job is completed. Leaders and employers could practice persistence with strategies such as eliminating those distractions that may prevent job success, figuring out the best approach for you to be your most productive self, overcoming roadblocks by connecting with your inner dialogue, and refuse to let self-doubt, which is one of my big issues, take over your mindset and attitude towards meeting a goal. And the last habit of mine is remaining open to continuous learning. I know we here at Southeast South Central are constantly striving to keep that continuous learning cycle in place. From an early age, many of us have been taught to value certainty rather than doubt, to give answers rather than inquire, and to know which choice is correct rather than to explore alternatives. Effective leaders overcome that need for certainty and inspire others to be in a continuous learning mode. Their confidence in combination with their inquisitiveness also allows them to constantly search for new and better ways. They're always striving for improvement, always growing, always learning, always modifying and improving themselves. They seize problems, situations, tensions, conflicts as valuable opportunities to learn. Leaders and employers could practice remaining open to continuous learning with strategies such as incorporating topic share time. So providing an opportunity for the leaders and the people in your buildings to get together to share their thinking, maybe a little bit informal situation where everybody just gets together and talk. And we just recently did this here at the co-op. How are we going to improve our attendance in the sessions that we're offering? You know, our attendance is very, very low right now. So we have timeshare where we get together and talk about those kinds of topics. We look at new perspectives and information that we can find on the topic. We need to, as leaders, embrace humility and pride when admitting we don't know. Reframe this as a launch for exploration, curiosity, and mystery rather than limitations. And finding time to ask those questions and seek those connections. Deep learning is fueled by an inquisitive mind, developing capabilities for effective and thoughtful action. We want to take just a minute, first of all, to say thank you for sitting through our very brief session. It felt so brief to me, but are there any questions that you might have that Angie and I might be able to answer? Very quickly, it looks like we only have a minute.
Thank you all so very much for dropping into our session today. I know it's probably been a long day and we were here at the end, and we appreciate you guys.
Thank